Good afternoon, and welcome to yet another episode of The League of Biblical Enthusiasts. In our last episode, we talked about William Tyndale, his life, his Bible translations, his influence, and his untimely death in 1536. Today, we focus on three translations in the wake of Tyndale, those being the Coverdale Bible of 1535, the Matthew Bible of 1537, and the Great Bible of 1539. So let's begin with the Coverdale Bible. Miles Coverdale was born and grew up in York, England, and was an avid learner from childhood. In time, he became an Augustinian monk. Side note, Martin Luther was also an Augustinian monk. But Coverdale was influenced so strongly by the Reformation ideas that he eventually left the order. He continued his studies at Cambridge under Robert Barnes, who was a Protestant sympathizer, who also was later burned at the stake. But in 1528, Coverdale fled England to Antwerp for refuge from King Henry VIII, who was still sympathetic in many ways to the Catholic faith and opposed to unauthorized translations. But of course, whose mind would be soon changed. Little did anyone know at the time. In Europe, Coverdale worked with Tyndale on his translation of the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. Meanwhile, Coverdale continued his work alone to produce what became the first complete English Bible in print. He was not yet proficient in Hebrew or Greek, so he used Latin, English, and German sources, plus the translations of Tyndale himself. Coverdale's Bible, published in 1535, was the first complete English translation of the complete Bible, not just the Old Testament or New Testament or portions, and the first complete printed translation into English. In 1537, the folio edition carried the royal license and was therefore the first officially approved Bible translation in English. Coverdale's Bible was also the first English Bible to introduce chapter summaries similar to what we found in the Latin Vulgate. Coverdale's Bible included the Apocrypha, or also called the Deuterocanonical books, separate from the canonical books, rather than those books being scattered among the Old Testament, as in the Septuagint and the Vulgate. A note in Coverdale's Bible informed the reader that the apocryphal books did not appear in the Hebrew Bible and thus were not of the same authority. This, of course, was contrary to Roman Catholic thinking. Next, the Matthew Bible of 1537. Even though Tyndale tried desperately to finish translating the Old Testament, he could not due to his death. And the task was left to one of his disciples, John Rogers. Rogers was born near Birmingham about 1505 and graduated from Pembroke Hall, Cambridge in 1526. After graduation, he became rector in a church in London until 1534, when he went to Antwerp as a chaplain to English merchants. Here, he met Tyndale. He soon embraced the Reformed faith and helped Tyndale smuggle Bibles into England. Tyndale's New Testament, as we know, was published in 1526. His complete Bible, however, which he could not finish, was put out under the pseudonym of Thomas Matthew in 1537. It was John Rogers, Tyndale's disciple, who translated parts of the Old Testament that Tyndale left unfinished. The pseudonym Matthew is associated with Rogers, but it seems more probable that Matthew stands for Tyndale's own name, which back then, of course, it was dangerous for him to use openly in England. Rogers' work was largely used by those who prepared the Great Bible, and this eventually, of course, led to the Bishop's Bible and then the King James Version. Queen Mary, aka Bloody Mary, came to the throne of England in July 1553. She was a staunch Roman Catholic and tried to reverse the course of the Reformation through harsh measures. And so caught up in all of this was John Rogers, who was burned at the stake for his Reformation views on 4th of February, 1555. Bishop Thomas Cranmer, who had encouraged the Matthew Bible, was also executed in 1556 under Queen Mary's reign. Lastly, today we talk of the Great Bible of 1539. The Great Bible was the first authorized edition of the Bible in English, authorized by King Henry VIII of England to be read aloud in the church services of the Church of England. The Great Bible was prepared by Miles Coverdale, working under the commission of Thomas, Lord Cromwell, secretary to Henry VIII and vicar general. In 1538, Cromwell directed the clergy to provide, quote, one book of the Bible of the largest volume in English, and the same to be set up in some convenient places within said churches that ye may have care of, whereas your parishioners may most commodiously resort to the same and read it, unquote. My, how times changed so quickly. It's known as the Great Bible because of its size. Its pages are 16.5 inches by 11 inches. And as in his earlier Bible, Coverdale was more of an editor than a translator. He brought together the best readings of his day. Thus, the Great Bible was a revision of Matthew's Bible, which was a continuation of Tyndale's translation. Next week, we do a dive into the Great Bible of 1539 and a couple of more English translations prior to the King James of 1611. We do hope you've enjoyed this short episode. I hope you comment, like, subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, please ask away. I'll do my best to provide an answer. If you have comments, we are totally open to that. Any constructive criticism as well is welcomed. I hope you have a good afternoon. And again, thank you for listening to yet another episode of The League of Biblical Enthusiasts.